A look at the mining sector as well, with developments around the DRC and Glencore, as well as Rwanda opening its doors, opening its gates for migrants coming out of the United States. That and a whole lot more coming up for you this afternoon on Africa in Business.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
We begin here this afternoon with an acknowledgement that the continent of Africa faces a significant challenge in closing its infrastructure funding gap. The continent requires between $130 billion and $170 billion every year to build the power, transport, water, and digital systems that are needed for growth and economic inclusion. Yet investment continues to fall short, leaving large parts of continental economies and society underserved. This is contained in the Public Investment Corporation, the PIC's first research paper titled Accelerating Infrastructure Development in Africa: Strategies to Reduce Lead Times. To discuss the outcomes of this research paper further this afternoon, we are joined by Brenton Lalu, the sector specialist for Africa at the PIC. A very good afternoon to you and welcome to Africa in Business, Brenton.
Thank you. Good afternoon to you and your listeners.
So why is accelerating infrastructure development in Africa not only necessary, which is what the research paper has found, but is now at a point where it's urgent?
Thanks. So I think Africa is at a tipping point at the moment. We have one of the world's youngest populations. We have rapid urbanization. We have soaring demand for water, energy, transport, etc. But the infrastructure to support that growth, it's not keeping up at all. Like you mentioned, the continent faces a massive infrastructure gap annually. And every year, by a lot of counts, we're falling short of that. That's not just lost output, though. It's lost jobs, stalled trade, delayed climate resilience, and arguably a widening inequality. If you look at infrastructure, it unlocks bottlenecks, unlocks missing links, and has knock-on effects to so many other sectors. We got climate risks that are rising, cities that are growing, and poverty rates that are still very high. So it's not just necessary, it's urgent for inclusive, sustainable development of the continent.
And what was the scope of this research paper? Yes, it says infrastructure development in Africa. Which are the countries that were actually profiled or researched?
Thank you. So we looked at the continent as a whole. We looked at specific projects that are happening in the continent. We looked at specific sectors, and we broke down what's actually happening, whether it's the bottlenecks that are enforced into Africa, or whether it's um, or whether what solutions are working and not working. We've derived a four-pillar strategy solutions that that is our take on how to accelerate infrastructure development. We've also tried to put together a time frame recommendation, so it's actionable strategies that can be implemented in a short term, medium term, and long term. So we looked at the continent as a whole, looked at certain projects, looked at the bottlenecks that are experienced, and looked at strategies to implement what's needed to accelerate these infrastructure development.
Mr. Lalu, you spoke earlier about capacity building, and I wonder, how does capacity building go hand in hand with a financial innovation?
Sure. So I think financial innovation, the word sounds exciting and um, seems very out there, but I think if we use blended finance, PPPs, and certain guarantees, without capacity on the ground, it doesn't land um, as such. Because I think even the smartest financial tools need skilled hands to apply them. You can design a perfect structure, um, but if the project team can't manage procurement or structure a viable pipeline, it won't get off the ground. We have enough skills on the continent. What we need, I think, is arguably targeted skills development. I think that's why capacity building and financial innovation must go hand in hand. We need governments and institutions that understand how to absorb capital and manage risk and report transparently. These need to translate into local expertise. The financial analysts, the public officials, the engineering, the investors that can work together, not just around them. Everyone needs to work together. We need to build skills in the people that can unlock the capital on the continent.
Mr. Lalu, given what you're saying, does this imply that there then has been an incredible amount of financial wastage and time wastage in the past? Because the issue of infrastructure development is not new to the African continent, and nor is financing of these projects. So, if money and resources have been pumped into infrastructure development, and if, as you're saying, there is a shortfall of and a lack of targeted skills, and that needs to be developed, does that mean that there's been a gap that's resulted in wastage?
I think what's been happening on the continent is, and we dive into it in the report, is there's a siloed, fragmented approach to development and investing on the continent. So there's a lot of different stakeholders working in their pockets, but I think what actually needs to happen is that we need to work together as a whole. We need to have those ambitious projects being executed. There's a lot of projects, as I mentioned in the report, there's 80% of projects that fail to get off the ground. That means that projects that have ambition doesn't get built, capital doesn't come in. So before it gets bankable or into financial close, where institutional investors come in, the projects fail. Um, so we need those projects to deliver, and execution's been a major issue on the African continent. So we need to move from having these ambitions of projects to executing on these projects and to pull in capital, private capital, public capital, institutional capital within the infrastructure space as well.
And what has a comparative assessment of Africa's infrastructure landscape when you juxtapose it against the global benchmarks? What does that reveal?
So I think the landscape itself, it's clear and it's costly compared to global benchmarks. For example, we invest less than half of the global average in infrastructure. If you look at power generation, we have one of the lowest electricity access rates globally. Transport, only a fraction of the roads of the continent are paved. And regionally, the connectivity is quite weak. Digital, digitally, internet penetration is improving, but lags our peers in Asia and Latin America. But I think it's just not about numbers. If we look at infrastructure deficits, they're systematic, they're not just financial, right? So they reflect maybe weak planning, slow approvals, limited maintenance, fragile institutions. So it means we need to rethink how we plan, how we manage infrastructure investments from start to finish. Because I think we need to build systems that work for the African context, um, and not necessarily copy and paste what's been happening globally.
I think you already have, Mr. Lalo, touched perhaps on what could be, themed under the recommendations that have come out of this research. But could you take us through on what the way forward is and the recommendations that have come out of the research paper?
Sure. So I think in the paper we've gone through the bottlenecks. We've gone through everything. We've gone through exercise to see what works and what doesn't work and where the gaps are. We've developed strategies um, that are diverse into four distinct pillars. Now, to address the deep-rooted infrastructure bottlenecks, right? We have a four-pillar strategy that we recommend. Pillar one, policy and regulatory reform, right? We should streamline approvals, institutional mandates, and create a goal that is stable, predictable environment that boosts investor confidence and reduce project delays. Pillar two is all about what we spoke earlier about innovative financing. The infrastructure gap cannot be closed with public funds alone. It needs institutional capital, it needs private capital. We've talked about blended finance and de-risking tools to mobilize private and institutional capital. We also talked about domestic pension funds must be a part of the equation as well. Pillar three, we talk about tech and digital integration. Digital tools like geospatial analytics, Internet of Things, to enhance transparency, reduce inefficiencies, and improve the product delivery. Pillar four, we talk about capacity building and institutional strengthening. Infrastructure delivery depends on the people delivering. This means we need to invest in the expertise, the skills to improve procurement system and support delivery units within institutions. I think though what's important that these four pillars, they offer coherent strategy, but they're not independent of each other. They depend on each other and they're interlinked. So we need to go from planning to execution to impacting the communities that we need to serve.
That seems to be, quite central to not only the research, but the recommendations as well that have come out of this research. As you mentioned, the need to work concurrently and to work seamlessly together in a way that's integrated, as opposed to, different institutions or different parts of the process being independent of each other, and thus the silo effect that you speak of, Mr. Lalu. We thank you so much for your time and taking us through the first research paper put together by the Public Investment Corporation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That's Brenton Lalu. He's a senior specialist for Africa at the Public Investment Corporation. He takes us to exactly 21 minutes after 4 p.m.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
It is exactly 21 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Now, at the recent Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedoms Symposium, South Africa's Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola, addressed key issues shaping the country's role in global trade and geopolitics amidst its G20 presidency. Speaking on the ongoing 30% tariff dispute, Lamola assured that South Africa remains actively engaged in negotiations. This is despite the unpredictable global trade environment. He emphasized the need for economic diversification, strengthening partnerships with the European Union, China and the Middle Eastern markets, as well as leveraging the African Continental Free Trade Area as a critical platform for sustainable growth. Speaking to the minister and covering this particular gathering is Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe.
The event drew diplomats, academics, students, and civil society members to discuss South Africa's current role on the global stage and the effects of its strained bilateral and trade relations with the United States. South Africa is facing a 30% tariff on goods exported to the U.S., raising concerns about the potentially severe economic impact on this decision. Speaking to the audience, DECO's Minister Ronald Lamola stressed the hope for a future agreement, but acknowledges the difficulty in providing guarantees due to the volatile global trade environment.
So I can't tell you with certainty that the 30% tariffs issue will be resolved. What I can tell you is that South Africa remains engaged and open to negotiate on the basis of resubmission of an offer through our trade and industry, and also that this unpredictability and the global turmoil on trade, as you are aware, is a global phenomenon. It's not just an exceptional South African case. It is a global challenge facing geopolitics, trade winds across the globe. There are indeed features that could be uniquely South African because every country receives at the bilateral level the types of tariffs they will receive, and ourselves, indeed, it has been confirmed to be the 30%. So we're engaged with the process with the hope that an agreement will be reached at some stage. But I can't say that with certainty because it's an unpredictable situation.
Minister Lamola emphasized the need for South Africa to adapt to an unpredictable global market by reducing economic risks through diversification and self-sustainability, while also exploring emerging opportunities.
South Africans, we need to prepare ourselves for the reality that this is an unpredictable market. This market being unpredictable does need us as a country to de-risk, to diversify in terms of our economy, to build our own self-sustainability, to look into other markets across the globe. At least we already have what we believe is a reliable partner, the European Union. We need to build from that relationship, look at what is possible. In March, we had a summit, which we believe came out with very good outcomes from which we can build. And a market in China, which the president already built relations, a comprehensive strategic partnerships, and they've opened up to the South African economy, including the African market in a big way. We need to focus there in the Middle East. They are opening up various markets. The African continent, it's our anchor. The SADC region, the AFCTA should be our anchor platform to work on this process that enables us to build our economy.
At the back of SA-US discussion are two issues, the BEE and the Land Expropriation Acts, which the US is imposing on South Africa to withdraw. Lamola said these issues are sovereign to South Africa.
The issue of the BEE, the Expropriation Act, we view this as domestic sovereign issues that South Africa has to deal with as a country in line with our laws and in line with our constitution. And I will not have to tell this audience, but for the purpose of those that may watch in future, South Africa has got a history of inequality, the history that has led to our economy and also the inequality that poverty has got a color. In terms of states, SA is known like poor, whites are rich in the South African context. And because of that, the Constitution of South Africa has put it as a constitutional imperative, the transformation in our society. And that's why we have got the BE laws, we have got the Expropriation Act that is now coming, and we've got many other laws dealing with the issue of diversification.
John Rowett from the University of Oxford says the most compelling aspect of the event was the active and informed participation of young people, particularly on how they directly questioned and challenged Minister Lamola.
I thought that the most interesting aspect to it was the young people's questions, how well informed they were, and the way in which they did grill the minister, and the minister's willingness to be grilled was very striking. He engaged with them in a very open and democratic way. I think that if one takes the overall shape of foreign policy, there were certain things that it was clear the minister couldn't really talk about, but within that, he was remarkably open and willing to be challenged. And so, from the viewpoint of how South African foreign policy is being handled, it was an extremely impressive performance.
The Campaign for Free Expression Director, Nicole Fritz, made comments on the false narrative on South Africa by the White House.
Obviously, South Africa's international relations, its foreign policy, is very much in the spotlight at the moment, as was indicated in this dialogue. We've seen South Africa come under huge criticism, much of that criticism entirely unsubstantiated from the new US administration under President Trump. So there has been suggestions that there is a white genocide that has been perpetrated. We saw a kind of ambush in the Oval Office by President Trump of South African President Ramaphosa. A lot of the information that President Trump was relying on has been shown to be false.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
That takes us to exactly 28 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Also coming up in the coming 30 minutes here on Africa in Business, we'll be having a conversation with Victor Humuswana as we take a look at some of the leading stories on the African continent. We'll be looking at the transportation system in Tanzania, the issuing of further visa bonds for countries such as Zambia as well as Malawi. Also look at the mining industry with developments there in the DRC and also Rwanda agreeing to accept some migrants coming out of the United States. That conversation coming up at about 10 to 5 this afternoon. This is Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We take you now to the markets desk where Chanduko Legege is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. $1 is trading at 17 Rand 73 in South Africa, Botswana 13 Pula 39, Namibia 17 Namibian dollars 73, Zambia 23 Kwacha 3 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shillings 6, Ethiopia 138 big 26, Uganda 3,000 shilling 546, Tanzania 2,000 shilling 485. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 528. Egypt, the dollar is at 48, Egyptian pound 48, Tunisia 2 dinar 88, Algeria 129 dinar 212. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 96. In Angola, the dollar is 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is 2,870 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is at $3,400, platinum at $1,329 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil, $66.80 a barrel. That is all from me. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 117144459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Legege.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And standing by for the business of sport from the sporting desk, here is Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. Well, Manchester United's agreement to sign RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko for $94 million will take their spending on their forward line past $450 million. But the question is, how and who are they going to play in the midfield? Let's hear from Benjamin Shepherd as he filed this report.
I mean, when you look at how quickly also Manchester United have got these deals done in terms of over a week, well before the season begins, it is pretty impressive work. And when you consider, as you mentioned, they finished 15th last season, there's no European football next season as well. The signings are a statement of intent. And also, I think there is some excitement, for these players coming to Old Trafford to be part of the team, to be part of the story that tries to get Manchester United back to the peak of English football.
Right, staying with English football, Aston Villa have completed the signing of Nice striker Ivan Goussand for $46 million plus $7.3 million in add-ons. The 24-year-old Cote d'Ivoire forward scored 12 goals last term and was also named the player of the season as Nice finished fourth in France's Ligue 1. The France-born attacker boasts Una Emery striking options at Villa Park, with Ollie Watkins the only recognised centre forward in the Spanish squad. Now, Villa's summer transfer window has been impacted by the club's need to comply with Premier League as well as UEFA financial rules. On to this story now. Victoria Mboko started the WTA 1000 tournament in Montreal with a career earnings of $458,000, with $396,000 of that coming from the 2025 season alone. Her biggest payday to date, though, came at the French Open, where she earned $195,000 for reaching the third round. But she has also earned nearly double her career earnings with her Canadian Open win, as she picked up a prize check of $752,000. Not bad for an 18-year-old who has taken her career tally now to $1.2 million US dollars. Meanwhile, Ben Shelton staged a remarkable comeback from a set down to triumph over Karen Khachanov in the Canadian Open final. He made his first maiden 1,000 Masters title and pocketing a whopping 1.2 million US dollars in prize money. And the American now has Jack Draper in his sight, both in the ATP men's ATP rankings and the all-time prize money list. Now, Shelton's winnings marked the highest ever in the history of the Canadian Open, and the 22-year-old will undoubtedly now be brimming with a lot of confidence as he heads into the US Open, where he will be offered a record-breaking prize money pool, where the winners of that competition are set to take home 5 million US dollars. And finally, football fans are being urged to be aware of fraudsters when buying match tickets online after a study showed an estimated 6.5 million US dollars had been lost to scammers in the past 2 years. Now, Lloyds Bank estimate at least 12,000 supporters have fallen victim to ticket fraud across the past 2 campaigns, with their own customers also losing around 700,000 US dollars. When expropriated nationwide, it's estimated that more than 5.5 million US dollars have been lost to ticket scammers. Now, Lord Hanson, the Minister of Fraud in England, says supporters should only buy directly from clubs, their official partners, as well as legitimate resale outlets. It's 16:35 p.m. Central African time. That concludes your sports news on this Friday. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. Have a great sporting weekend. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:35 Central African time as we turn our focus to Women's Summit, as women all over different parts of the African continent gathered for what is called the Pan-African Transformational Leadership Summit in South Africa's Eastern Cape province. The topics covered at the summit included entrepreneurship, transforming the public and the private sector, the supply chain management, and financial services for women and youth. The summit was a partnership between non-governmental organisation Africa for Africa and the Provincial Department of Social Development in the Sisi Sekgalo attended the summit and has more on the story.
Women gathered together with one voice of empowering one another. They came from various sectors which include government, non-governmental organizations, the private sector and many more. The member of the Executive Council, MEC of Social Development in the Eastern Cape Province of South Africa, Bukwe Fanta, hailed the summit as being important for the advancement of African women.
Networking is a key when you start anything. Women in other countries have got the same problems and how they tackle it and move forward. So what we have got that Eastern Cape women together with women from other countries to share. We've got women from Egypt, we've got women from Madagascar. They are sharing their own experiences and they've moved. And we're saying even our women, they must copy and move forward.
Mariam Lesian, who's the president of Pan-Africa Tourism Board, was representing the African continent. Her organization's aim is to promote and complement the tourism sector in Africa and to create sustainable tourism. She says they collaborate with all the countries, with tourism boards, authorities, ministries, and even tourism stakeholders. Her topic was on opportunities in the tourism and hospitality industry.
I've always been insisting that the African women, they're working so hard, doing beautiful art crafts, doing beautiful handcrafts, talking of the beads, and very colorful and very beautiful. I can insist on that. But the value of the money which they get, it's really nothing. It's, to me, I say it's nothing. They're not getting anything based on the work which they're putting into what they're doing. So what I really want to encourage and to tell my fellow women in this forum, that we have to stand up, we have to wake up. The African women, the ordinary African women, have to be taught how to do things. We're not going to touch how they do it how they do their art craft and everything. We're going to polish what they're doing so that it can be more valuable and can compete in the world market. And another thing which we're going to do, we're going to create opportunity for them to sell their products in one of the Pan-Africa Tourism Board platform so that they can get the money or the value which it's supposed to be.
Another organization which was represented in the summit is She Millionaire. It is run by Dr. Mendis Kauge. She expressed that her organization advocates for women to be financially independent, and they also have an academy which is empowering women, especially from rural backgrounds. She believes the barriers of women accessing finance is lack of knowledge by women and lenders not willing to risk with women. She expresses why the summit is crucial.
This summit is very significant to us as we are looking into ways that we can assist these women in procuring and securing finances so that they can start their business. Because once we empower them, they now need to go and execute what we empowered them with. But without finances, they're not in a position to do so.
Egypt was represented by Dr. Nevin Nakhla, the founder and chief executive officer of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA trading company in Egypt. Her company's mandate is to facilitate and aggregate intra-Africa trading for small, medium and micro enterprises, even large companies. Her role in the summit was to talk about the AFCFTA.
Intra-African trading today is not more than 15%. Any other continent, they are reaching 70 and 80% trading among each other. So with the AFCFTA, we are hoping that by the end of this year, we'll reach more than 50%. So they chose also under the trading companies and that are the implementers, they have made a protocol, a special protocol for women and youth, financial and economic inclusion. So the central bank, for example, after implementing this initiative in Egypt, they allowed women and youth to open bank accounts with their ID without commercial registration or tax registration. And they gave them a visa machine, a POS, to go to the exhibitions and to go to the fairs and to sell their products and to have a bank account officially. This also will support them to start exporting.
Meanwhile, local women from the Eastern Cape province were exhibiting their products in the summit. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in East London, South Africa.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
It is exactly 4:41 Central African Time. Now, the South African Broadcasting Corporation is pleased to announce the launch of the new self-registration platform. Vendors wishing to do business with the SABC can self-register on our internally developed platform. Vendors are able to access this platform on the SABC website, which is www.sabc.co.za/SABC/ under e-tenders or self-register at www.etender.sabc.co.za/, and from there you can follow the prompts to self-register. Visit SABC social media pages for more information.
AUSISA, the Association of Water and Sanitation Institution of South Africa, is a platform uniting Africa's water professionals. This November, Africa leads the conversation on water and sanitation. Join global and African leaders at the AUSISA Africa and Global South Dialogue 2025 from the 9th till the 12th of November at the Emperor's Palace, Johannesburg. From policy innovation, this is where action meets collaboration for a water-secure future. Register today at ausisa-watersan-dialogue.org or follow at Ausisa on social media. Ausisa, working together for sustainable water and sanitation security in Africa. Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
As we do every single Friday, we're joined by Victor Khumoswana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. We'll be looking at a number of stories today, and chief among those are some of the developments that are taking place in the United States. We do know that United States President Donald Trump has been on a mission to ensure that a large number of migrants are actually, escorted out of the United States, for lack of a better word. We'll be finding out the role that Rwanda will be playing in this, a country that has lifted up its hands to assist the United States by accepting some of those migrants. We'll get more details from Victor Khumoswana. We'll also take a look at the Democratic Republic of Congo and the export ban that is in place there as far as cobalt is concerned, and how is this impacting the mining landscape. Also under the radar today, a story that we've been carrying for you, that Zambia and Malawi they've been given a $15,000 visa bond. This is for tourists and business travelers. We did touch on the story a little bit yesterday. Victor Khumoswana will be giving us a couple of new angles regarding this, as well as his perspective of how this will impact tourism in the United States. The commentator that we spoke to yesterday was of the opinion that this really will not make a dent in the U.S. tourism sector, that it will not make a dent even to Zambia or Malawi. We'll find out if Victor Khumoswana is also of the same opinion, as well as reasons why. Tanzania and its transport system also under discussion today on Africa in Business with Business Roundup. Victor Khumoswana.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
Before we chat to Victor Khumoswana, let's take a look at the Reserve Bank as the global economic headwinds grow stronger, from rising US tariffs to geopolitical instability. The South African Reserve Bank says it's managing to keep inflation under control and has moved to clarify its inflation target stance. Behind the scenes, the South African Reserve Bank is also fighting a quieter but equally critical battle, that of protecting its financial independence and long-term sustainability. Dimakatso Leshuru filed this report.
The world has watched trade tensions intensify, particularly in the United States, where effective tariffs have now reached 18.3%, their highest level since the Great Depression. The resulting price pressures have rippled through the global economy, and South Africa has not been spared. Lesetja Kganyago is the governor of the Reserve Bank.
It is now increasingly clear that tariffs will settle at higher rates. The Yale Budget Lab calculates the effective tariff as of August at 18.3%, the highest since 1934. This implies significant price pressures that will have to be absorbed somewhere in the system. In this context, it is unsurprising that the US Federal Reserve has been keeping policy rates on hold, with the stance still somewhat on the restrictive side.
While many economies are feeling the pinch and the uncertainty this brings, South Africa's inflation rate has stayed relatively stable. Over the past 12 months, headline inflation has increased to just 3%, the bottom of the Reserve Bank's 3 to 6% target range. This is despite several risks this year, including the spike in oil after the Iran bombing in June and a sharp rand depreciation in April. Kganyago says these shocks were short-lived. Inflation has remained well anchored, and he'd like to keep it that way. Price stability has given the bank the space to hold interest rates steady and even ease them by 125 basis points since September 2024. Speaking at the bank's annual general meeting on Friday, Kganyago sought to clarify the bank's targeting stance following statements by the National Treasury and President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier in the week, reacting to the Monetary Policy Committee statement in the week before.
And all that the Reserve Bank had to say was that the target range is 3 to 6. We used to aim in the middle, and we said we need a policy cushion. We will aim at the bottom. Why now? Why didn't you do this thing 20 years ago and aim for the lower end? I mean, inflation targeting had been there for 25 years. And the only reason it was done now was because inflation is already there at 3.
So where does this leave growth? Despite improvement in the country's electricity that has seen the energy availability factor rise to 70%, the Reserve Bank has cut its growth forecast and now expects the economy to expand by about 1% this year, pointing to years of stagnant economic growth in the domestic economy.
The drivers of weak growth are mainly structural and require structural reforms. Put in plainer language, without economic jargon, we need trains to run and the cities to function.
Regarding its own balance sheet, earlier in the year, the Reserve Bank agreed to transfer $14 billion into the National Revenue Fund to help National Treasury reduce its debt and debt service costs. The money came from the Gold and Foreign Exchange Contingency Reserve Account, GFECRA. The government withdrew $8.4 billion from the GFECRA account this year, and with the rest to be received in tranches until 2027, a decision that has huge consequences, Khanyago explains.
These are unrealized profits. The only way you can realize them is to sell the underlying assets, meaning we must sell our reserves. It was something we were not prepared to do. So we created a liability on the books of the SAP. So when we transferred the 250 billion rand to the treasury, that money enters the monetary system and creates excess liquidity. The South African Reserve Bank must sterilize that money. Now with a new monetary policy implementation framework, what we do is that we would take the money on deposit and the banks would bring the money back into deposit with the Reserve Bank. When that money comes back into deposit with the Reserve Bank must now pay interest on that money. So on 100 billion rands, at the current repo rate of 7%, that basically means that the SAP has to find 7 billion rands every year in order to mop the excess liquidity. At the time, the capital of the bank was just about 20 billion rand. It doesn't take long to realize that in just under 3 years, the capital of the Reserve Bank would be wiped off. And so, once the capital of the Reserve Bank is wiped off, what do you have? We must call and queue like the other state-owned enterprises at the Treasury and say, capital please. Once you enter that territory, I don't know what conditions they could come. They could come to something like allow inflation to do this or cut rates, do this, and all of that stuff is a conversation I don't want to have.
For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Dimakatso Leshoro.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 4:52 and a very good afternoon to you, Victor Khomuswana. Good to have you with us once again.
Good to talk to you again, Thami. Sorry, I had dropped the phone.
Not to worry. Look, for a Friday afternoon, it is totally understandable, Victor. But but look, quite a lot that's on the radar today. We see some progress as far as public transportation coming out of Tanzania.
Yeah, it's impressive to me how many African cities, especially the fast-growing ones, including Dar es Salaam, are beginning to prioritize greener systems, transportation system. Rapid Transit Agency of Dar es Salaam, the CEO talking about this project expected to create about 1,000 job opportunities, 255 drivers, among others, belonging to a local company called the Moffat Company. But as you can expect, developed phase 2 of it, 20 kilometers or so, connecting 4 parts of Dar es Salaam, the capital, by a Chinese company called Sino Hydro Construction. So, you know what, in the end, China is in Africa to do business, and they are investing a lot, and they need that transit system to work, but also to sell their merchandise. And I think these buses are also sourced from China, 99 of them. But what I like is for every bus that you put on the road, you're likely to remove 4 to 6, even 10 cars. And if you create a rapid bus transit system, you then eliminate the number of cars on the road, and you immediately decrease the carbon emissions and lower the carbon footprint. So it's a good thing. I'm just worried that it seems to be everything is going the direction of one country, and that is China, which already is owed a lot of money by African countries.
And I see that there is the potential here of creating about 1,000 job opportunities from this operational rollout. But that, as you've noted, is minuscule. It's a drop in the ocean compared to how much has been generated by China, not only for the infrastructure development, but for the buses themselves.
For the buses, yeah. I mean, $159 million. That's a lot of money. But I suppose, hey, if you are that's the thing. China uses the debt that it has in Africa, or against the claims they have, to negotiate some of these deals for their companies, especially the construction and engineering companies that they are doing, and of course to offload some of the tasks. I mean, you and I as South Africans will know how many German and Swedish and other European car manufacturers are closing dealerships when the Chinese are increasingly, even being sold through some of the traditional dealers like the Mercedes-Benz dealerships. Now you find they are stocking Chinese cars. So it's a real aggressive move by China, and I'm just worried that the negotiations are happening behind the scenes, not necessarily on an equal footing for both countries, because most African countries are indebted to China for the infrastructure development that would have taken place already.
And certainly many would say a missed manufacturing and infrastructural development opportunity there for Tanzania. But also Rwanda agreeing to allow some migrants to enter Rwanda from the United States.
Yeah.
It's not a first for Donald Trump. It's been a long time coming, and it really has been one of his key priorities.
And it's not the first time Rwanda gets involved in a migrant swap deal, or the swapping of migrants. They tried it. The former prime minister of Britain tried that, and it was challenged by human rights group, and I think it's still in the courts as we speak. And I don't know what the new Keir Starmer is going to do about it, or if he has made a decision. But it's almost Rwanda, as much as we consider it a little overcrowded because it's a small country for the 11, 12 million people it has, still has a lot of room. And because they are able, migrants, Thami, do build world economies. So anybody who manages to hustle their way to the United States, as they did to Europe, as they did to any other country that is supposed to give them a better life, then they get rejected. But then Rwanda seems to be willing to take them in, as long as the country sending them to them are able to give them a bit of money and training to, as they said, as Yolanda Makolo, the spokesperson of the government, said, to jumpstart their lives in Rwanda. It's seen by others as a form of, shall I say, slave trade, because you are literally moving people who are desperate, who are not able to negotiate for themselves from a country where they initially tried to migrate to another. But I suppose Rwanda, because of its stability and ability to control crime and secure the people, is able to attract people, and they are hoping to bring people with certain types of skills, so that out of that desperation they can then make them, if you like, loyalists of the government. Because if you are given a lifeline when you are a refugee, you are not going to be going out of your way to betray the country that rescued you, especially Rwanda, which has got such a strong security system.
I mean, looking at Rwanda, this is a great opportunity for them to continue making the money. They did pocket the money that came out of the United Kingdom. It was hundreds of thousands of British pounds. That didn't work out. But hey, they still pocket the money.
They didn't return the money.
And they did not return
the money. Thank you.
Yeah, getting something for nothing. We'll have to leave it at that for today. Unfortunately, Victor, time not really on our side, but really looking forward to us again meeting next week just to break down some of the interesting business stories pertaining to the African continent. Thank you once again.
It's been a pleasure, Thami.
It always is. Thank you. That's Victor Khumusana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He brings us to exactly 4:59 Central African time, and that is how we, as African business, bid you farewell and goodbye for this week. It really has been a fantastic and productive week. Thank you to our producer, Thami Ngubeni, our technical producer, Nanda Khoza, as well as on social media, Sfiso Hlope and Talent Butelezi. I'm Thami Ngubeni. You have yourself a splendid evening further. Goodbye.
Vue d'Afrique, un magazine des actualités en français sur Channel Africa. Rendez-vous du lundi au vendredi avec Joël Mouteba sur Channel Africa de 15h à 16h dans une